You're sitting on the ground at a family party, grass stains on your only good dress, while everyone else gets chairs because you're just a single mom who apparently doesn't deserve better. That was me last Saturday at my nephew's birthday party. My sister-in-law Ivory looked me dead in the eye and said single mothers should sit on the floor since we're more flexible and used to making do with less. I wanted to disappear into the ground right there. But then something happened that changed everything. A man in an expensive suit walked through the backyard gate, briefcase in hand, scanning the crowd like he was looking for someone specific. When he spotted me sitting there in the grass, humiliated and ready to leave, he walked straight over and said the words that made my entire family drop their cake. "I've been looking everywhere for you, Miss Moreau. You own this house now." I'm Celeste, and I've been a single mom to my 8-year-old daughter, Luna, for 2 years now. After my divorce, I've been working double shifts as a waitress during the day and cleaning offices at night just to keep our tiny apartment and put food on the table. My family has never let me forget that I'm the one who couldn't make it work in marriage, the one who's always struggling, always behind on something. They see me as their charity case, the family member who needs pity but doesn't deserve respect. My brother Kingston lives in this beautiful suburban house with his wife Ivory and their son Phoenix. Ivory has this way of making comments that sound helpful but cut deep. She'll say things like, "Oh, Celeste, don't worry about contributing to the family vacation fund. We know money's tight for you." Or, "Maybe Luna can wear Phoenix's hand-me-downs since you probably can't afford new clothes anyway." Kingston never stands up for me, and our mother Deanne just nods along like Ivory's being generous instead of cruel. I love my nephew Phoenix dearly, which is why I was at this party in the first place. I'd saved up for weeks to buy him a decent birthday gift, even though it meant Luna and I would be eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner more often than I'd like to admit. I drove up in my beat-up Honda wearing a dress I'd bought 3 years ago when life was different, when I still had hope that things would get easier. What my family didn't know was that I'd been getting letters from some law firm for the past month. I'd been too scared to open them, assuming they were about some debt I couldn't pay or legal trouble I couldn't afford to handle. I'd shoved them in a drawer and tried to forget about them, because when you're barely keeping your head above water, the last thing you want is more bad news. But as I sat there on that grass, watching other parents in their nice clothes talk about their vacation plans and private schools, while my own family treated me like I was less than human, I had no idea that those unopened letters were about to turn my entire world upside down. I had no idea that the woman they all looked down on was about to become the one holding all the power. This is the story of how one man in a suit and a family secret I never knew existed changed everything in the span of 5 minutes, and how the people who thought they were better than me learned that sometimes the universe keeps score in ways nobody expects. I pulled into Kingston's driveway that Saturday afternoon and immediately felt that familiar knot in my stomach. His house always made me feel small. It's one of those perfect suburban homes with the manicured lawn, the 2-car garage, and the kind of front porch that screams, "We made it." I sat in my car for a moment, looking at my reflection in the rearview mirror, trying to psych myself up. Luna was bouncing in the back seat, excited to see her cousin Phoenix, completely oblivious to the social minefield we were about to walk into. "Mommy, can we go in now? I want to give Phoenix his present." Luna's excitement was infectious, and I forced a smile. She was holding the gift we'd wrapped together the night before, a Lego set that had cost me 3 weeks of tip money. It wasn't the biggest or most expensive gift Phoenix would receive, but it was what we could afford, and Luna had picked it out herself. "Of course, baby. Let's go have some fun." I grabbed my purse and the small gift bag I'd brought for the party favors, checking my phone one more time to see if any of my job applications had gotten responses. Nothing. Just another overdue notice from the electric company that I'd have to figure out how to handle next week. The backyard was already buzzing with activity when we arrived. Ivory had outdone herself with the decorations. There were balloons everywhere, a professional-looking bounce house, and tables loaded with catered food. The other parents were already mingling, and I could tell just by looking at them that they were Kingston and Ivory's usual crowd. The women were wearing clothes that probably cost more than I made in a month, and the men were talking about golf and business deals. "Celeste, you made it!" Ivory's voice was honey sweet, but her eyes were already scanning my outfit. I saw her take in my 3-year-old dress and the small scuff on my shoes that I'd tried to cover with a marker. And Luna, don't you look precious? Phoenix is over by the bounce house if you want to find him. Luna ran off immediately, and I was left standing there with Ivory, who was already looking past me at the other guests. "The food is on the tables over there," she said, gesturing vaguely. "We got it catered from that new place downtown. I'm sure it's much fancier than what you're used to, but I thought we'd splurge for Phoenix's special day." There it was, the first dig of the day, delivered with that trademark smile. I'd learned to expect these comments from Ivory, but they still stung. "It looks wonderful," I managed to say. "You've really outdone yourself." I made my way over to where some of the other parents were standing, hoping to blend in. They were discussing their kids' private schools and summer camps, topics that felt like they were from another planet. I nodded along when appropriate, but mostly I felt like an outsider looking in. These people lived in a world where money wasn't a constant worry, where they could sign their kids up for activities without calculating whether it meant choosing between groceries or gas. Kingston appeared at my elbow, beer in hand. "Hey sis, glad you could make it." His greeting was warm enough, but I could see the way he glanced around nervously, like he was worried I might embarrass him somehow. "How's the job hunt going?" "Still looking," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "I've got a few applications out there, so we'll see." "Well, something will turn up," he said, but his attention was already drifting to his other guests. "Ivory's been working on this party for weeks. She really wanted to make it special for Phoenix." I watched him walk away to join a group of men who were laughing loudly about something, and I felt that familiar ache of loneliness. Even at family gatherings, I felt like I was on the outside. I wasn't part of their world of successful careers and financial security. I was the cautionary tale, the example of what happens when life doesn't go according to plan. My mother, Deanne, was sitting at one of the tables with some of the other older women, and I could tell by the way they kept glancing at me that I was the topic of conversation. Deanne had that expression she always got when she was explaining my situation to people, that mixture of pity and disappointment that made my chest tight with shame. I found a spot near the gift table where I could keep an eye on Luna without being in anyone's way. She was having a blast with the other kids, her laughter carrying across the yard, and seeing her so happy made all the discomfort worth it. This was why I came to these things, why I endured the subtle insults and the feeling of being judged. Luna deserved to have family, to feel connected to something bigger than our small world of just the two of us. But as I stood there watching the party unfold around me, I had no idea that everything was about to change in ways I couldn't have imagined. The party was in full swing when I noticed the seating situation becoming an issue. More families kept arriving, and the folding chairs that had seemed adequate earlier were now clearly not enough. I watched as couples naturally paired off and claimed seats together, their children running around the yard with cake-sticky fingers and boundless energy. I'd been standing near the gift table for about an hour, shifting from foot to foot in my uncomfortable shoes, but I didn't mind. Luna was having the time of her life, and that's all that mattered to me. That's when Ivory approached me with that smile I'd learned to dread. It was the smile she wore when she was about to say something that would sound reasonable to everyone else, but would cut me to the bone. She was carrying a plate of those fancy little appetizers, looking every inch the perfect hostess in her designer dress and pearl necklace. "Celeste, honey, we have a little situation," she said, lowering her voice just enough to seem conspiratorial, but not so much that others couldn't overhear. "We're running short on chairs, and I was thinking, since you're so good at adapting to different situations, maybe you wouldn't mind sitting on the grass. You know how single moms are so flexible and resourceful." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my face flush hot with embarrassment, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. Around us, other parents were pretending not to listen, but I could see them exchanging glances. Some looked uncomfortable, others seemed to be waiting for my response, with barely concealed curiosity. "I mean, it's just practical," Ivory continued, her voice getting a little louder. "The married couples need to sit together, and they're not really used to making do with less comfortable arrangements, but you've gotten so good at managing in difficult circumstances." I wanted to disappear. I wanted to grab Luna and run to our car and never come back. but Phoenix was looking over at us with his big smile, still innocent enough not to understand the adult dynamics playing out around him. And Luna was right in the middle of a game with the other kids. I couldn't make a scene. I couldn't be the dramatic single mom who ruined a child's birthday party. "Of course," I managed to say, my voice barely steady. "That's fine, no problem at all." "I knew you'd understand," Ivory said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "You're always so reasonable about these things." I looked around for Kingston, hoping my brother might step in and offer his own chair or suggest a different solution. He was standing about 10 feet away with a group of the other dads, clearly having heard the entire exchange. Our eyes met for a moment, and I saw something flicker across his face that might have been shame. But then he looked away and continued his conversation like nothing had happened. My mother, Deanne, was sitting with the other older women, and when I caught her eye, she actually nodded approvingly at Ivory's suggestion. Uncle Merrick, who was lounging in one of the more comfortable chairs with a beer in his hand, actually chuckled and said, "Well, Celeste's always been the practical one in the family." So I sat down on the grass, feeling the dampness seep through my dress almost immediately. I tried to arrange myself in a way that looked dignified, but there's no graceful way to sit on the ground in a dress while everyone else is in chairs above you. The physical discomfort was nothing compared to the emotional humiliation of being singled out this way, of having my circumstances thrown in my face in front of all these people. From my spot on the ground, I could hear fragments of conversations floating around me. The other parents were discussing vacation plans, private school admissions, and home renovations. Someone was talking about their nanny's schedule, while another parent complained about having to choose between their country club membership and their boat payments. Their problems were so different from mine that they might as well have been speaking a foreign language. I watched Luna playing with the other children, her joy completely unaffected by the social dynamics the adults were navigating. She looked over at me once and started to come over, probably noticing that I was sitting in an odd spot, but I waved her back toward the other kids. I didn't want her to witness this humiliation, didn't want her to see how her mother was being treated by people who were supposed to be family. The worst part wasn't even the sitting on the ground. It was the casual cruelty of it. The way Ivory had made it sound like she was doing me a favor by pointing out how pathetic my situation was. It was the way my family had stood by and watched it happen, some of them even seeming to enjoy the show. I was starting to gather my things, planning to make some excuse about needing to leave early when everything changed. I'd had enough. The humiliation was complete, and I could feel tears threatening to spill over if I stayed another minute. I started gathering my purse and the light jacket I'd brought, trying to be discreet about my preparations to leave. The last thing I wanted was to draw more attention to myself, to give Ivory another opportunity to make some cutting comment about how single moms always leave parties early. I pulled out my phone and sent Luna a text, even though she was only 30 feet away. "Come say goodbye to Phoenix in a few minutes. We need to head home soon." I didn't want to call out to her across the yard and make it obvious that we were leaving. I'd learned to manage these exits carefully, to slip away without causing a scene that might reflect poorly on Luna or give my family more ammunition for their judgmental comments. While I waited for Luna to notice my message, I tried to compose myself. I smoothed down my dress, which now had grass stains on the back that I'd have to figure out how to remove. I practiced the smile I'd wear when I made my excuses, the casual, "Luna has an early day tomorrow," or "I promised a friend I'd stop by." Anything to avoid admitting that I was leaving because sitting on the ground while my family treated me like a second-class citizen had finally broken something inside me. That's when I saw him. A man was approaching the backyard gate, and he stood out immediately from the casual party atmosphere. He was wearing an expensive-looking charcoal gray suit, perfectly tailored with a crisp white shirt and a silk tie. His shoes were the kind of polished leather that probably cost more than I made in a month. He was carrying a leather briefcase that screamed serious business, and he had the bearing of someone important, someone who commanded attention without trying. He paused at the gate, scanning the crowd methodically like he was looking for someone specific. His eyes moved from group to group, assessing each person with the kind of focused attention that made me instinctively straighten my shoulders. When his gaze swept over me sitting on the grass, I felt a flash of embarrassment, wondering what this well-dressed stranger thought of the woman in the wrinkled dress sitting on the ground while everyone else had chairs. Ivory noticed him too and immediately switched into her hostess mode, the way she always did when she wanted to make a good impression. She glided over to the gate with her most charming smile, clearly assuming he was some important business contact of Kingston's who had stopped by to wish Phoenix a happy birthday. "Hello there," she said in her sweetest voice. "Are you here for the party? I'm Ivory, Kingston's wife." The man nodded politely but didn't return her smile. "Good afternoon. I'm looking for Ms. Celeste Moreau. I was told she might be here today." My heart dropped into my stomach. Someone was looking for me, someone official and serious looking, and it couldn't be good news. My mind immediately raced through all the possibilities. Had I missed a court date? Was there some problem with Luna's school? Had they finally tracked me down about those medical bills from when Luna had pneumonia last year? Ivory's expression shifted, and I could see her mental calculation happening in real time. This well-dressed, obviously successful man was looking for her embarrassing sister-in-law, the one she'd just humiliated in front of the entire party. Her smile became strained, and when she pointed me out, her voice carried a note of disdain that made my cheeks burn with fresh shame. "That's her right there," Ivory said, gesturing toward where I sat on the grass, "sitting on the ground where she belongs." The man's expression hardened as he took in the scene. I watched his eyes move from me to the empty chairs around the yard, to the other parents lounging comfortably while I sat in the dirt. Something shifted in his demeanor, a coldness that hadn't been there before. I struggled to my feet, brushing grass off my dress and trying to maintain whatever dignity I had left. My legs felt shaky, and I was mentally calculating whether I had enough money in my checking account to handle whatever legal or financial crisis this man was about to drop on me. I thought about the unopened letters in my kitchen drawer, the ones I'd been too scared to read, and wondered if my avoidance had finally caught up with me. He walked directly toward me, ignoring the curious stares from the other party guests who had started to notice the disruption. Kingston had stopped his conversation and was watching with a concerned frown. Even the children had paused their games, sensing that something significant was happening. "Ms. Celeste Moreau?" the man asked when he reached me. "Yes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "That's me." "My name is Harrison Blackwell from Blackwell and Associates. I've been trying to reach you for 6 weeks." Harrison Blackwell opened his leather briefcase with the kind of practiced efficiency that spoke of years handling important documents. The metallic click of the latches seemed unnaturally loud in the sudden quiet that had fallen over the backyard. Even the children had stopped playing, sensing that something monumental was happening in the adult world around them. "Ms. Moreau," he said, pulling out a thick manila folder, "I represent the estate of your great-aunt Vivian Ashford. She passed away 3 months ago, and I've been tasked with executing her final wishes." I stared at him blankly. Vivian Ashford. The name was vaguely familiar, like something from a half-remembered childhood story. I had a dim memory of meeting an elegant older woman at a family gathering when I was maybe 8 or 9, someone who had given me a beautiful music box and told me to always remember that I was special. But that was over 20 years ago, and I'd barely thought about her since. "I'm sorry," I said, still confused, "but I don't understand. I hardly knew my great-aunt. Why would you be looking for me?" Harrison's expression softened slightly, and I caught a glimpse of something that might have been compassion in his professional demeanor. "Ms. Moreau, your great-aunt Vivienne was a very wealthy woman. She owned several properties and had a substantial investment portfolio. More importantly, she spent the last few years of her life keeping track of her family members, particularly you." The crowd around us had grown completely silent. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, but I couldn't focus on anything except Harrison's words. He opened the folder and pulled out several official-looking documents with heavy letterhead and gold seals. "According to her will, which was updated just 6 months before her death, you are the sole beneficiary of her entire estate." He handed me the first document, and I saw my name clearly typed in legal language that I couldn't fully comprehend. This includes all of her financial assets, which total approximately $2.3 million. I heard someone gasp behind me, probably my mother, but the sound seemed to come from very far away. The number bounced around in my head without finding anywhere to land. $2.3 million. It was more money than I could conceptually understand, more than I'd ever dreamed of having. But there's something else, Harrison continued, and now his voice carried a note of what I could only describe as satisfaction. She also owned this property. He gestured toward Kingston's house, the beautiful suburban home that had always made me feel so small and inadequate. Your great-aunt Vivian purchased this house 15 years ago as an investment property. She's been renting it to your brother at well below market rate as a family courtesy. The world seemed to tilt sideways. I looked at the house, at Kingston's face, which had gone completely white, at Ivory, who was staring at Harrison like he'd just announced the end of the world. "That's impossible," Ivory said, her voice shrill with panic. "We've been living here for 5 years. We've put money into renovations. We've made this place our home. There has to be some mistake." Harrison turned to face her with the kind of cool professionalism that suggested he'd dealt with this type of reaction before. "There's no mistake, Mrs. Kingston. The property deed is quite clear. Your lease was month to month and tied directly to Ms. Ashford's life. Upon her death, the property reverts to her designated heir." He looked back at me. "That would be Ms. Moreau." "But we didn't know," Kingston said, his voice cracking slightly. "She never told us she was planning to leave everything to Celeste. We assumed the house would eventually be ours, or at least that the family would inherit equally." Harrison pulled out another document, this one handwritten in elegant script. "Your great-aunt left a personal letter explaining her decision. She wrote, and I quote, 'I have watched Celeste struggle with grace and dignity, while others in the family have prospered. I have seen how she works tirelessly to provide for her daughter while receiving little support or respect from those who should love her most. She deserves security, and she deserves to know that someone believed in her worth.'" The silence that followed was deafening. I looked around at my family's faces, seeing shock, dismay, and something that looked uncomfortably like fear. Ivory was staring at me like I'd suddenly grown a second head, while Kingston appeared to be doing rapid mental calculations about their financial situation. "Any improvements or renovations you've made to the property," Harrison continued, "naturally become part of the property's value, which now belongs to Ms. Moreau. However, the original lease terms specified 30 days notice for termination, which I'm officially providing today." I was still holding the documents, my hands trembling slightly as the magnitude of what was happening began to sink in. The woman they'd all pitied, the family failure they'd just humiliated by making her sit on the ground, now owned the very house they were standing in. I looked around at the faces of my family members, each one frozen in a different stage of shock and disbelief. The same people who had spent years making me feel small and worthless were now staring at me like I was a completely different person. But I wasn't different. I was the same Celeste who had been sitting on the grass 5 minutes ago. The only thing that had changed was their perception of my worth, and that told me everything I needed to know about who they really were. Ivory was the first to break the silence, her voice taking on a tone I'd never heard before, desperate and pleading. "Celeste, surely we can work something out. We're family. We've been taking care of this place, making improvements, treating it like our own home. There has to be some arrangement we can make." The irony wasn't lost on me. This was the same woman who had made me sit on the ground less than 10 minutes ago, because single mothers were more flexible and used to making do with less. Now she was asking for flexibility from me, the person she'd just publicly humiliated. I looked at Ivory, really looked at her, and felt something shift inside me. For years, I'd accepted her treatment because I thought I deserved it. I thought my struggles made me lesser somehow, that my financial difficulties meant I should be grateful for whatever scraps of respect my family threw my way. But standing there, holding documents that proved someone had seen value in me when my own family couldn't, I realized how wrong I'd been. "Ivory," I said, my voice steady and calm, "I think you should sit on the ground now. You're more flexible, aren't you? Used to adapting when circumstances change?" Her face went pale, and I saw her eyes dart around to the other party guests who were watching this family drama unfold. She was experiencing the same humiliation she'd inflicted on me, but somehow it didn't give me the satisfaction I thought it would. It just made me sad for all the years I'd wasted trying to earn respect from people who were incapable of giving it. Kingston stepped forward, his expression a mixture of desperation and disbelief. "Celeste, come on. You can't seriously be considering kicking us out. We're your family. We've been here for Phoenix's whole life. This is his home." "You're right, Kingston. We are family." I turned to face him fully, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was looking at him as an equal, instead of looking up at him from some lesser position. "And as family, you just watched your wife humiliate me in front of all these people and said nothing. You heard her tell me to sit on the ground like a dog and you turned away. That's the kind of family you chose to be." My mother, Deanne, finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Celeste, honey, surely you're not going to let this money change who you are. You've always been such a sweet, understanding girl." Understanding. Sweet. Code words for pushover and easy to manipulate. I'd been understanding when they forgot to invite me to family dinners. I'd been sweet when they made comments about my parenting or my financial situation. I'd been accommodating when they treated me like the family charity case instead of a person worthy of basic respect. "You're right, Mom. I am understanding. I understand now that you all showed me exactly who you were, and I just wasn't ready to believe it." I looked around at each of them, these people who shared my blood but had never really been my family in any way that mattered. I understand that when you thought I had nothing to offer you, you felt free to treat me however you wanted. Harrison cleared his throat gently. "Ms. Moreau, I don't mean to interrupt, but we do have some paperwork to complete, and I imagine you'll want time to process all of this information and make decisions about the property." I nodded, grateful for the interruption. "You're right. I need time to think about everything." I looked back at Kingston and Ivory. "You have 30 days just like the lease specified. That should give you time to find somewhere else to live." I called Luna over, and she came running, her face bright with excitement from playing with her cousins. She had no idea that our entire world had just shifted on its axis, that we'd gone from worrying about paying rent to owning a house and having more money than we'd ever dreamed of. As we walked toward my beat-up Honda, I could hear the frantic, whispered conversations starting behind us. My family was realizing that they'd just lost their home and shown their true character to someone who now held all the power. The woman they'd spent years looking down on was walking away with everything, while they faced the uncertainty they'd always assumed was my burden to carry. But the most important lesson I learned that day wasn't about money or houses, or even revenge. I learned that people's true character shows when they think you have nothing to offer them. My great-aunt Vivian had been watching from a distance, and she saw what I couldn't see at the time. She saw that dignity isn't about how much money you have in your bank account. It's about how you treat people when you think nobody important is watching. Sometimes the universe keeps score in ways we never expect. Sometimes the people who try to make you feel small end up small themselves. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person everyone underestimates turns out to be the one holding all the cards. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't determined by other people's opinions. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places and never letting anyone convince you that you deserve less than respect. Your story matters, and so do you.